tutorial is going to walk you through how you're going to create your grid. I'm starting with a single artboard in Illustrator, and I'm going to begin by selecting a rectangle tool or any other shape tool. I'm going to start with the rectangle tool. I'm going to use that, and I'm going to click and drag it over my entire artboard. Okay. And what this is going to do is it's going to, any shape that I make, I can turn it into a guide, and that guide I can use as my grid. The first thing I'm going to do is create a margin. Okay, the margins are those spaces outside of the format, if you recall from our grid notes. So what I'm going to do that, I'm going to go to Object Path and Offset Path. And this will give me an option to make this same rectangle either come inside or outside. If I have a positive number, it's going to go on the outside, make a larger rectangle. If I have a negative number, it's going to make a smaller rectangle to the exact same dimension. So I'm going to just try this out. I'll do a -10 because I want to create a rectangle inside. And you'll notice how that created some margins for me, 2 rectangles. Okay, this will make sense a little bit in a moment. And I actually probably want a larger margin, so I'm going to just hit Control-Z. I'm going to try that again. I'm going to get a larger number. So offset path, let's try -30. You'll see that kind of created a smaller rectangle. So now I have 2 rectangles, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to click and drag over both of those, right click, and go to Make Guides. And that's really what I want to do. And what that means is these guides, I can hide them, I can work with them as grids, but I'm going to just click Make Guides. And they turn these into this kind of beautiful turquoise color. Okay, so now I have my margins. I can that's important because I kind of want my information. I'm not sure if I want everything to go off the page. So that's the first thing you're going to do, is to create your margins. The next thing you'll want to do is think about, well, what type of grid are we using? What type of layout do we need? Are we doing a versus comparison, or are you going to do a timeline? I've grabbed an example from Everlane, it's a clothing company that gives you all the information about their costs from everything from the beginning to the end. And so it's transparent. So this is a good infographic about timeline. If I was going to do a timeline, I would probably want to know where the center of my work would be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a rectangle and I'm going to click and drag over to kind of create a center line. And what you'll notice is there's actually an X in the center that tells you where the center of your rectangle is, the one that we created already. So that's really nice. I can kind of cut a rectangle here, and then what I can do with that is I can just click and make a guide. That gives me, now it's separated my page in half, and I can kind of align everything. I'll always know where the center is. And then I might want to actually think about, well, I might want to divide my infographic up in equal parts, or at least know how I could potentially do that. So I'm going to just feel it out here and then create some horizontal columns. Maybe this would be a good column to use for my title. Just creating rectangles here. I'm going to hold Alt and drag, which copies it for me. And a really cool trick, if you want to continue to do something and duplicate a move or a command that you've made, you can hit Command D. I'm going to hit Command D, and then I'll just keep creating rectangles for me all the way to the bottom. And you'll notice how it didn't perfectly line up. So I'm going to click and drag all of them, bring them down here. Okay, resize them a little bit. And now what I can do is I can right click and I can make my guides. And now I have, I don't have to use these every single line, but now I have a guide. I have a guide of like how I could organize my work evenly. Okay. And then I probably want maybe a couple more vertical lines or kind of, in between these spaces, I might want to divvy those up evenly. So what I might do is make this rectangle and figure out, okay, if that's the center, I'm going to drag this into the center there, copy and paste that, and put that on this side. And that way I can see these 4 different channels that I have. That will be useful for me. I'm going to take those and make sure I make them into guides. So let's say that the title of I'm just going to use this as an example. Let's say the title of my piece is, let's see here, production timeline. I'm just going to use this as an example, and I have my text. Okay. Now what I can do, as I start to bring in text, I'm not lost on where I need to put them. I know exactly where the center is. I could go over here and center, align center on my paragraph window, and I can bring that, and that will be completely, I can move it in the center. I could use this line right here to kind of put this over here, and then we kind of can start building. And in their timeline, just to use theirs as an Everlane's as an example, I could kind of start drawing circles and using my using my grids as guides. And this is really useful. It helps you understand like how you're spacing your work out. Let's try that again. And especially if you're thinking about, well, what's going to be the most important thing for me to use? Like, what's the hierarchy I want? And then you're going to use this structure, right, as we talked about before. And then you can think about, well, maybe I want to have little graphics over here, or maybe I want to put little shapes. Maybe these can be like, these can represent something else, and you start building your design, and you start building your draft, and you use the grid to help kind of organize your information. I'm going to get another video of other ways you can use the tools in Illustrator, but this is all about creating your guides. And then the last thing I want to say about this is you can hide these. So as you start building your work, let's say that you wanted to put like a background color. Let's just borrow one of these colors here. Right now I have a lot of work to do. But if you want to see what happens, like what's my work going to look like at the end, if I can hide these grids. Let's say I have a little bit more information. I'm laying them out. I'm using my margins, yada yada yada. I can actually just hit Command, which is your window button, and colon, and I can hide the grid to see what it looks like. And that's really good to use as a preview tool, because no one's going to really see your grid at the very end. Okay, you can also go to View, Guides, Hide Guides, and that shows you the hotkey as well. Okay, you're going to be responsible for making your own grid. It can be very simple. It can be more complex. Totally up to you. You can even make shapes. Like if I wanted to make all these circles into guides, I could make those into guides. I would just select them all, right click, make guides. You can use those as guides. Pretty cool. So those are your introductions to how you're going to make your grid. Of course, I'm always going to be here to help you in class, but this hopefully give you an idea of what you could do as you begin creating your infographic.